Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our December A Garden in Every Season tour. My name is Paige Engelbrechtson, and I am the Nature Center Education Specialist for the Highlands Biological Foundation. The foundation supports natural history research and education in the Southern Appalachians, primarily through programs like these at the Highlands Biological Station. Our Garden in Every Season tour is designed to highlight what has been changing here at the Botanical Garden over the last month. And I'm filming a little bit ahead of time to take advantage of some of the really cool things that have been happening recently with a cold snap. You might be able to tell that this portion of Lindenwood Lake has actually started to freeze over. Now, it's not very thick. You can clearly see there are patches of open water, but it is much more extensive than I was thinking, and that is courtesy of the very chilly days we had earlier this week, where it was 7 degrees with wind chill, according to some thermometers. And you can even see we got a little bit of precipitation on the 1st of December. That is still continuing to linger around despite the sunshine. So I thought I would film what the Botanical Garden looks like today to give you all some of the clearest signs of what's changing. And in addition to things like the frost and the snow, the garden has gone quiet in a lot of ways. A lot of our birds have moved to warmer climates. A lot of our visitors have as well. So I thought, in addition to spotting some of the really cool things that are making the garden beautiful today, we would take this kind of like a ramble and just see what kinds of things catch the eye and what they can tell us about what is still happening here at the Botanical Garden, even at chilly start to December. One of the things that I'm noticing all over the forest, and have been for a little while now, are these shredded pine cones. These are courtesy of our squirrels, gray squirrels, but especially red squirrels. And I was actually looking this up because I was curious, and we're going to be talking about red squirrels when it comes to our Nature 101 program on December 15th. But I used to think that the pine cones would be up on a tree and they'd fall to the ground, and that the squirrels would then harvest them from the ground and chew them up at that point or store them in middens. What I actually learned, however, was pretty intriguing, which is when pine cones fall to the ground, most of the time you'll see these scales are open, meaning the seeds have been released. And the seeds are what the squirrels are after. That's why they're pulling the scales off, to try and find the seeds that'll be tucked down in here. So if a squirrel waits until a pine cone is on the ground, they are unlikely to get those seeds. So what they actually do is they will climb up into a pine tree or a spruce or a fir, and they will actually snip off the pine cones, harvesting them while they're still green and the scales are still tight. So that in a perfect world, if they've timed it right, the seeds will still be inside a tightly closed pine cone. At that point, they're going to gather them and either shuck them. You can see there's another little leavings over there. They'll either shuck them at that point in time for a snack, or they will hide them in middens. And as I mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit more about them during our Baby It's Cold Outside Nature 101 program later this month. So if you're interested, tune in for that. Okay. So this tree, I'm going to take a step back so we can get a large view. This little stripling of a tree is a really neat tree called a witch hazel. And I have been looking for one of these, and I'm very glad that I noticed it, because look at what it's doing. Let me see if I can get this in good light. What in the world is that? Those are flowers. It is December and the witch hazel is flowering, which is just, I find it really, really neat that a plant is doing something so unexpected in my frame of reference. You can see these little notches on the twigs. That's one of the ways that I recognize it. They have these beautiful kind of oval leaves. Focus, with big ribs in the summer. But these flowers are something that I've been looking forward to since I first noticed them last year. And you might think, well, Paige, if it was 7 degrees overnight earlier this week, is the witch hazel wind pollinated? Because surely there aren't any actual insect pollinators still kicking around. And the answer is no, there are. The witch hazel, as I understand it, flowers this late in the season to take advantage of those few pollinators who might still be kicking around before it gets too cold for them. Kind of the last gasp of the bees and possibly beetles and flies. I'd need to look it up to be sure. But if there's a pollinator out right about now, it's very, very hungry, and so it's most likely to be pollinating exclusively witch hazel flowers. Oh. What an odd little plant. I say little, but it's actually a decent sized understory tree. Oh, I did want to show you guys. So this is technically off the trail, so you can stand here and look. But I love when I'm walking around the Botanical Garden to stop and look in the mud along our creeks. Right now I'm just seeing the dimples from the rain, snow melting. But I am noticing kind of, I'm going to trace out right here. Looks like there are some boot prints, so perhaps a human walked this way not too long ago. Oftentimes you can see deer prints as they're walking across the stream or down for water. And recently I've been keeping a close eye out for otter prints because of the river otters that have been gallivanting around. So you can just stand here, and I'm actually going to come off the trail and get a little close because look at these teeny tiny little prints. Okay. They're really faint. These little itty bitty sets of prints. Something was scampering through here. I am particularly bad with my small mammals, so I can't tell you if these are squirrel or chipmunk. There are just dozens all over this sandbank. Anybody knows what they are, shout them out. Definitely not otter. So the sandy, muddy parts of our trails, and especially by the streams, are just great opportunities to see what has been moving through the Botanical Garden. If you're used to colder climates and you're not impressed with the faint smatterings of snow that I was showing you guys earlier, entirely valid. But tracks in snow are not something we get a lot of opportunities to check out, primarily because we just don't get that much snow. So I see a stream, stop to check it out, see if there's any clear prints, and then keep moving. Somewhere there is a child who is making their opinions on this known. But the garden is actually, when I said that most of our birds are gone, it has gotten really quiet as I've been walking through recently. Primarily I've only heard our juncos, our blue jays, our crows, seen a few cardinals, but for the most part there's a lot less birdsong now than there was earlier this year. Come off here and head into our bog area. The ground is actually pretty frozen right now, so I might not sink as deeply into the sphagnum as I would have earlier. So this is kind of cool. You can see here we've got pitcher plants and their leaves, and if you were part of our program earlier in November about winter adaptations, you'll know this red color comes from a group of pigweeds called anthocyanins. And take a look at the ones that are red, and then take a look at the ones far off over there that are still green. The pitcher plants that are more exposed to our winter sunlight are turning that purpley red color as a form of sunscreen. The ones that are less exposed and not quite as baked, I guess, are still green. So, looking in the sphagnum, and I can't tell, that may or may not be a deer track. Would not surprise me if it was. But you can see here how far the frost extends on the lake, even though it's, honestly, it's nice and warm in the sun right now. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so I would expect this to vanish along with the snow, which is one of the reasons I wanted to film today. And down here, if you've watched our bog program from earlier in the year, you'll know that this is cranberry. So if y'all had cranberry sauce with your Thanksgiving meal, this is the wild progenitor. You can actually see we've got some cranberries chilling out here. And you can look and imagine, okay, well, if I had a cranberry bag, and they're only popping up every so often here in the bog, probably need a lot more cranberry plants bred to be a little bit more fruitful to get enough berries to actually make any kind of dish. Sorry, I am still geeking out about the first snow of the year. So we'll see how long it hangs around. It's got plenty of places to tuck now that most of the taller vegetation has died back and fallen down. This way. Yeah, actually, this is a good... There's one of the red squirrels. One of the things that I've been finding more and more that winter allows me to do is, with all of the deciduous leaves down, I can really look at the trees. And I start to notice things that I wouldn't have paid as much attention to before. In fact, I got another squirrel pine cone down here. Probably not the same squirrel that's yelling at me. But on this magnolia, one of the things that I'm noticing are these holes. And I'll tell you, they go up a fair way on the tree. Any idea what causes those? Now, if you were going to guess research, because we are a field station, it's not a bad guess, but you will find these on trees all over the forest. There are crows saying hello. Even where no researchers have trod recently. These are drilled by a bird, and actually by a woodpecker, called the yellow-bellied sapsucker. They'll come and they drill these lines of holes in the tree, and you can imagine you jab a tree, what's going to come out? Well, sap. And it's interesting, kind of the word of mouth natural history that you tend to hear over time. I have had people tell me that what actually happens is that the sapsuckers will fly up and they'll drill a hole, and then they'll fly away and they'll wait. And as sap comes out, insects will be attracted to it. And the woodpeckers, the sapsuckers, will fly back and they'll eat the insects that are attracted to the sap. And then I've had equally knowledgeable people tell me that no, sapsuckers are actually eating the sap, and they may happen to consume some of the bugs that get caught in there, but that what they're going for is the sap itself. Based on my current natural history and what I've looked up, I would say the sapsuckers are most interested in the sap and probably will consume insects if they are trapped there, but that they're not baiting insects in the way that some of the people that I've talked to would suggest. And that kind of, again, misinformation is something that I'm always looking to correct. So if you've ever watched one of our tours and thought, good Lord, what in the world is she talking about? Never hesitate to call me out or suggest a correction. I do my best to do my due diligence, but it's always a learning process, and I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. Nope. So this is actually a spot. Normally this would just be leaves as far as the eye could see, but I love, in the last few weeks, really stopping to appreciate the shape of the trees that are growing around here, because some of them are really interesting. You might look at, for example, this tree right here, and it grows fairly straight. That pine behind it certainly does as well. Then you might be looking through a forest and you might see a tree that just looks like it's trying to grow in 5 million directions at once. This is certainly the one that's shadowed right now, thanks to this position of the sun, is definitely one of them. But even this other tree, a little bit yonder, just look at all the ways it's spraying out and fanning into the sky. And this tree, this darker tree right here, is actually a tulip poplar, which I found incredibly surprising when I first learned that, because, and let's see if I can get this without getting too much glare. Ooh, might be a challenge. If you look at these trees right here, see how tall and straight they grow? That is the typical way a tulip poplar grows. Just pops up to the sky like a daisy and just keeps growing. And so when I first looked at this tree and thought, my goodness, that looks nothing like a tulip poplar, what happened? There were a couple of options that came to mind. What do you guys think caused this tulip poplar to grow in such a fantastically convoluted way? Hello, Mr. Red Squirrel? Or Mrs. So one thought that I had was perhaps lightning. If lightning killed the main trunk of the tree, then it would have tried to continue growing by having other branches become leaders themselves. But actually, I was talking with Jason Love, the station's associate director, and he was telling me that this is a kind of tree called a wolf tree. Let's go see if I can get another angle on it. But think about the name wolf tree is just very striking. And it wasn't until I did some digging into it that I understood why it was called that. I just paused because I want to show you guys that red squirrel we heard. This pine cone does that squirrel no good because it's dried and opened and the seeds have fallen out. But a pine cone, this one's probably a little old, but a pine cone where the scales are still closed means the seeds are still in there. So if you see this, it's beautiful for Christmas wreaths, useless to squirrels, because the main point, the seeds are gone. Sorry, back to wolf trees. What in the world do you think would make a tree deserving of that kind of name? You know, if it was something like a cougar tree, I might say, well, maybe mountain lions sleep in them. Or bear trees. If you want to learn more about bears sleeping in trees, tune into our Baby It's Cold Outside program, because we're going to be talking about that there too. Okay, good. This one's not going to be shadowed. The context that I found for the name wolf tree was, if you imagine you're a forester and you want beautiful, lovely, straight trees like this tulip poplar right here, but in your field or your forest, you've got a great big old scraggly tree like this one that's just taking up so much of the space and the resources and the sunlight, you might think that it's preying on the younger trees that might be growing up underneath it, like a wolf, because it's robbing you of these valuable woodworking trees. This is not great for lumber. A tall, skinny, straight tree would be. So they advocated chopping these down, which is actually a philosophy that appears to have changed recently. And that's a great thing, because these trees, when they were growing, would have been the only tree in the area. Usually you find wolf trees around pastures. So imagine if this whole area was cleared, there was no competition, no reason for a tree to grow as straight and tall as possible to reach the sky as soon as possible. Well, if you were a tree just out in the middle of the open in a pasture, you could grow any which way you wanted. And that's what this tulip poplar did. It was reaching towards the sunlight, and sunlight was all around it, so it could start growing in these really unusual ways. And now the forest has grown back around it. But these trees, I was reading, people have these incredible stories about all of the kinds of life that you can find in a tree as complex and scraggly and gnarly as this. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye out over the seasons and see if I can spot similar stories of all the kinds of birds that you see in wolf trees and not others, because you find more insects in wolf trees, or you find more nests in wolf trees, etc., etc. Let's go this way. I'm just realizing this ramble is going, as we would say, at a true naturalist ramble pace. So I will probably wrap it up once we get back to the garden entrance. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of a glimpse about what the garden is looking like on this beautiful December day. And a little less planned than my other garden tours have been, but I really didn't want to pass the opportunity for you all to see just how incredible a winter forest can be. And in fact, take a look at this. Okay. So this, I'm sure there's got to be a good name for them. One is not coming to mind now. It's these beautiful ice crystals that have formed when the water in the soil began freezing. There we are. I mean, I've seen some of these 2 inches tall in some places where it's really wet. In fact, oh my God, look, there's even more. Okay, so this happens when, we get a real good cold snap is when I've noticed them. Just be glad you're not a little grub who was living in the dirt when these started forming around them. Oh, and there's even more. I'm guessing maybe the water seeping off the hillside has been pooling on this side of the trail, and that's why it's come up. But gotta look up the real name for these. If you know, please put it in the comments. Just these ephemeral glimpses of the impact that being at 22 degrees as a high for 2 days in a row will get you. You can see it's underneath the trail too. So as we're walking, you can't really hear it very well, but there's a lot of crunching going on. Yeah, there's some more crystals. All right, folks. Well, thank you for joining me for a much more relaxed, but hopefully still enjoyable and a little bit informative garden tour. We are going to have our Nature 101 on third Tuesday of the month, which I believe is going to be this 15th at 1 p.m. So keep an eye out for that. Oh, get another shot at the wolf tree. Other than that, we're going to have our next garden tour first Monday in January, which it's a little strange to say that we're coming to a brand new year. But we are, and I'm sure the garden will have more things to surprise, delight, and educate. So, thank you to everybody who donated to our Giving Tuesday campaign to help support the educational animals up at the Nature Center. You guys far exceeded our expectations and hopes, and we are incredibly grateful to you all. I speak on behalf of not the trees as the Lorax does, but instead our animals, as they can't say thank you for themselves. If you are in the area, the Botanical Garden does remain open dawn to dusk year-round. We do ask that you have a mask and maintain social distancing on the trails, as other people are likewise seeking the solace and the quiet up here. But please stop by, see if you can spot some of these things. See? Look at that. Red squirrel had a good old time with this one. Anyway, I'm getting distracted again. Hopefully you're able to spot some of these neat little signs that even though the garden is much quieter now, it is certainly not silent. There are the crows off in the distance. I don't think you guys can hear them though. And please stay safe, be well, and have a wonderful holiday. I look forward to talking with you all at another point. Take care.